So we're coming up on 6.
I'm okay with it. Let me check with Pete.
Okay.
Actually, is Kurt should be there. Kurt, you all set? I think you're good to go.
Okay, thank you. So it being 6 o'clock, I'll call this meeting of the Select Board to order. Just a note for the public, we are fully virtual this evening due to some unforeseen technical duties with the hybrid implementation. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and subsequent orders imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information, general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found at the town's website at www.chelmsfordma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so by accessing the Chelmsford Telemedia website, www.chelmsfordtv.org. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the town's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of the proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. I'll also note that in order to minimize distraction and undue influence on the board's deliberations, it is our practice to disable the Zoom chat function. If you have joined the Zoom meeting and will be speaking during an appropriate agenda item, please unmute your microphone and turn your camera on during that segment only. The Zoom raise hand function is also available from the Zoom participant screen. And with that, Ken, do you want to start with the public service announcements?
Yes, so it looks like our first one up is the Arbor Day celebration, which will be held Friday, April 30th at 3 p.m. The Age-Friendly Chelmsford, AFC, also known by the acronym Pocket Park, which is at the corner of North Road and Worthing Street, Chelmsford. They will be planting a Cosa dogwood tree. Of course, there will be socially distancing required, and this is being sponsored by the Chelmsford Garden Club in coordination with the family of Anne Sheely, who is a 61-year-old member of the Chelmsford Garden Club. So all are welcome to attend.
Thank you. That brings us to our public input segment of our agenda. Do we have anyone who wishes to speak during public input? Brian Latina, please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, Chair Timmons. I'm Brian Latina, 15 Jesse Road. I'm a Precinct 4 town meeting rep. And thank you, Chair Timmons, for allowing me to give my April 8th Select Board statement in full as part of tonight's public record.
And just for the rest of the board, there was an issue with the live feed at our last meeting, and Brian's comments were cut off. So I offered to him that he could say them again during tonight's live feed.
Okay, and I'll cut them short, Chair, and I shall be following up on the issue itself. The gist of my statement that was lost in the initial meeting, I believe it was recovered in the follow-up through the server, was that I had made a statement that, in my opinion, the moderator's letter to the town meeting reps was initially inappropriate in that it suggested that town meeting had been changed. The town meeting is based on our charter. The charter says that it is on April 26th in this case this year at the senior center. The location's a little bit inappropriate due to our healthcare issues that we have right now with COVID per the health department. However, we should have known this well in advance, and my suggestion at the time was that maybe we could change it to the other locations that we've used for the last 3 town meetings instead of the senior center. Anyway, my statement was to town meeting reps that in my opinion, we still are required to show up on April 26th at the senior center. And if in fact we don't have a quorum, in part due to the letter or fear of COVID by some members, then the representatives that are there at that time can decide when and where to have the meeting. That's how it's properly done. Other towns have changed their meetings, but they would have gone through Chapter 3910A, had the Board of Selectmen declare an emergency like Walpole did. And then you go through a procedure where the moderator makes a decision to change it like they did. They changed theirs from May 3rd to May 1st in a field, for example.
1 minute, Brian.
Yep, so that's my statement. My intention is to go on Monday at 7:30 at the senior center and be one of the ones to vote in the event that we don't have a quorum. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak during public input? Okay. Ken, do you want to do committee vacancies? Oh, you're muted, Ken. You're muted, Ken. There we go.
Is that, can you get me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. Just bear with me 1 second. So the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee has one unexpired 3-year term ending June 30th, 2021, has one 3-year term. The Board of Appeals has one 3-year term. The CCA Advisory Committee has 2 1-year terms. Center Village Master Plan Implementation Committee has 2 1-year terms. Commissions on Disabilities has one 3-year term. Community Action Program Committee has one 1-year term. Council on Aging has one unexpired 3-year term, 5 associate member positions. Cultural Council has one unexpired 3-year term. Energy Conservation Committee has one unexpired 3-year term and one 3-year term. Holiday Decorating Committee has one 1-year term. Parade Committee will welcome all applicants to 1-year terms. Permanent Building Committee has one 3-year term. Personnel Board has one 2-year term. Public Celebrations Committee has 5 1-year terms. Recycling Committee has one 1-year term. Roberts Field Advisory Committee has one 1-year term. Tree Committee has one unexpired 3-year term and one unexpired 3-year term, the difference being one ends June 30th, 2021 and one ending June 30th, 2022. If you're interested in serving on any town board or committee, please feel free to complete an application found at the town website, or for more information, feel free to contact the town manager's office at 978-250-5202, or you can find the town manager's email address on the website and reach out and they'll get you the information. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Paul, that brings us to reports and presentations.
Yes, thank you. Our first report this evening is Finance Director John Souza, who has a unique request regarding, and a timely request regarding a land donation. And I'll turn it over to John. John's on the call this evening.
Thank you, Town Manager Cullen. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Just to give you some background on the land donation, on April 9th, I met with Paula Fretwell of 21 Twist Road regarding a land parcel that her mother would like to donate to the town. Both Mrs. Fretwell and her mother are Elaine Kenny, a longtime North Chelmsford residents. Mrs. Kenny acquired this land, and there you see a small GIS map on the screen of this parcel. It's outlined in blue. Mrs. Kenny acquired this land, I'm told, roughly about 60 years ago when the Commonwealth of Massachusetts made a land taking for the construction of Route 3. And this small parcel was a remainder, left over. It's parcel 23-99-1, and it's located, as you see, right near the intersection of Main Street and Meadowbrook Road. It contains approximately 6,638 square feet, and it has an assessed value this year of $1,800. Mrs. Kenny's been paying taxes on it all these years, and in talking with her and her family, they really don't have a use for it. I asked town council to review the donation request, and they advised that under Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 14, the select board would need to vote to accept the parcel as a gift, and then the land donation would then need to be approved by a vote at town meeting. Their family is working on estate planning, and the disposition of this parcel needs to be completed as soon as possible. Approving the donation of this land would help both this resident and the town for a couple of reasons, in my opinion. The parcel may be of interest to our Department of Public Works should improvements or redesign ever need to be done at near Main Street, Meadowbrook Road. And the other consideration would be, the donation helps us avoid approximately $2,500 of court costs and legal fees that would be associated if we had to go the tax taking and foreclosure route. And that's something neither of us want to see because of the time that's involved in a foreclosure case. If special town meeting is scheduled around the same time as our spring town meeting, I'd like to request that this be added to the warrant. Respectfully, I request that the board consider accepting the donation of this land parcel 23-99-1 as a gift for general public purposes. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions from the board?
I don't have any questions, but John, I having seen and sat through some of these auctions and understanding the cost that gets outlaid from the beginning for these piece of land, I think it's actually a great idea for us to do that and avoid the expense down the road of having to go through that, foreclosure and then turning around to having an auction it off or do whatever with it.
John, I have a question with regard to the purpose, and I realized that it was about their eligibility for Mass Health through their estate planning and so forth.
Yes.
Did you also ask council if there were any issues with us accepting this as a gift as part of those proceedings?
I mentioned it to town council. They didn't indicate any concerns on that. The attorney Alphen from the town council's firm did prepare a quick claim deed for them to sign, and that's something that, should the board vote tonight to accept it, then I would then work with the family to have that deed signed.
Okay, so it sounds like we didn't get a read on that. So
Yeah, they didn't bring that up as a concern, Mark. I did mention to them one of the reasons why they were very anxious to get this completed, just on the time factor, and they didn't say anything on that.
yeah, no, I totally understand it. Having been through it the last 3 years, that's why I asked the question.
Yeah, one of the concerns was that although it's not a high, the parcel has a low value. I believe in this case, it was just enough to push the individual over the limit for assets.
Yeah, no, I get that part.
John, I think what Mark's alluding to is a 3-year, I think it's a 3-year look back where they can come and take it back into the estate. So it could prove to be more expensive than the town has to turn it back only to take it again.
Yeah, that's exactly what my question was, because there are a lot of rules around that. And, I just want to make sure it's been thoroughly looked at before, because it seems simple and it seems like the right thing to do. But as we know, nothing ever is simple.
Right. I can run that by town council and ask them just.
Yeah. Yeah, because
it's really not going to slow the process.
Go ahead, Ken.
I was just going to say, it's not going to slow the process down because we're meeting again next week, right? And town meeting to schedule
No.
that will take 2 weeks, a meeting 2
Third,
weeks.
yeah.
But scheduling a special town meeting will take longer than that. So we might as well just make sure we got our T's crossed and I's dotted.
Exactly.
So Paul, does that give you enough time to schedule a special town meeting concurrent with our others?
Well, hopefully in 2 weeks, we may have a better idea of when the spring annual town meeting will be held, and then I can prepare a warrant for your consideration. You may recall there were a couple items from the last meeting, one having to do with Stedman Street, that I'm still waiting to hear back from council as to whether that needs to go to town meeting. And then we had the third issue regarding the solar on the roof of the senior center. So yeah, we'll see how things unfold in the next week or two, and either have it for the 3rd or for your meeting on the 10th. Either one would be timely for, depending upon when town meeting is finalized.
And I think on the other two, that what we had also said we needed to consider was whether we really have enough time to get the other two in line in time for
Yeah, so
spring
I'll check
town
with,
meeting, or whether we would need to, whether we're better off making sure we have our ducks in line and doing those in the fall.
so I'll check with Paul Haverty on that as well. Particularly the Stedman one, we should have some clarity. Okay.
So John, can you work with that timeline?
Yes,
We come back.
what I'll do, I'll contact town council, review that question, and then I can, I'll be glad to come back to the next scheduled meeting, and in the meantime, I can, whatever answer I receive, I can send out to the board so that all of you will know the answer.
Okay, and just for, would it be appropriate just to give John some indication whether there's anyone who's not receptive to this, in case he needs to get back to the requester on status?
I'm fine with it.
Okay. George, do you have any
Fine.
other concerns?
No, right, that's
Okay.
great.
Okay, I'm also fine with it, John, so we'll just check into that one thing.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
The next item on our agenda was a scheduled report and presentation, which is a standing item on our agenda from Steve Yonley regarding the Richardson Road Immediate Response Action Plan. I met with Steve earlier this afternoon and with Gary Persichetti. They have no additional information to report beyond what is contained in the Immediate Response Action Status Report #1, which you were emailed with last week. Basically, that's a 400-page report, but it's really a 20-page report that sort of summarizes the request from the state in terms of what work is to be performed over there. And then when you get to about page 9, it sort of provides a current status of the work that's been done under the approved plan during the reporting period, which basically, brought us to a few weeks ago. In speaking to Steve this afternoon, he does expect to have an update in 2 weeks from, 2 weeks from yesterday, your next meeting on May 3rd, that provides you with, more information than what's contained in this report. What's in the report in terms of a summary for those who don't have the report in front of them is the activity in terms of the soil borings and monitoring well installation and the preliminary results from the soil borings. The soil samples, they haven't been taken yet because you need a time period from once you install the wells to when you draw from the wells and then do get the results. And as you can imagine, the labs are very busy these days with PFAS testing and such. But again, that's where that will take place. We should have data in an upcoming meeting, and we'll have either Steve present and/or Paul McKinley, the LSP, to provide information. And then the report then goes on to talk about the work that was done in the field that was unexpected, which was such as the 4-drain investigation that was outside of one of the buildings, as well as the septic vault assessment that was located and found, and they did soil borings there near Richardson Road in front of the DPW building. And then addition was the work that was done in the back of the site where they found the extra barrel. Since that time, as the board knows, we did do the probing and the excavation of the area where the fire department temporary modular buildings will be installed. And they came back with those 3 excavations of a metal bar and so forth, but there didn't appear to be anything that proposed a PFAS concern. And then we're still awaiting the results from the probing that was done for a much larger area in the back of the property. And once those results come back, there'll be a scheduled date for doing additional investigation back there. So that's where things are under the report. The only other bit of news that I did receive today from Gary Prischetti is that the modular fire housing facilities are scheduled to be delivered to the site tomorrow. And then once they're delivered, then they would do the work of connecting the water and sewer lines to those modular facilities per the schedule for construction for the North Fire Station. So that's sort of a summary of where things are at this time, members of the board.
Are there any questions from the board?
I have a couple. I'll go last if anybody else wants to go first.
Go ahead, Ken.
All right. So, Paul, as I look at that diagram, are we going to, so we've done the larger area, which is the red square in the back. Are we doing anything under the foundations to see if there's anything still existing underneath there?
You mean the existing building foundations?
Well, remember we had said that I think it's 2 of the buildings have gone up in the last 20 years or so, and there was a question as to could they be sitting on top of any of this? Am I remembering incorrectly, or?
I'm
Again,
remembering. So is Paul? Isn't
Yeah,
that
I don't.
That's part of the quote that we're getting now.
Part of the
right?
entire quote, right? And I haven't seen that quote at this point in time.
Okay.
But that,
And then
but I'm sorry, Ken, just before we leave that point, the intention was that quote would also include scanning beneath those buildings.
Okay.
Okay.
And then my next question, if everything comes back and they don't find any PFAS, and I tried to read that report, I tried to get through the 20 pages and I'm of course Googling a lot of the definition and terms in there to figure out what is a PFAS and what isn't, because they weren't calling it PFAS, but then it would say no other PFAS were found. So I had to do a little learning there. But if everything comes back and they say that there's nothing on this entire site that is above the level for cleanup or issue, where do they go from there, Paul? Do they start going up the stream that feeds this? Because I didn't realize it was a direct stream like this feeding this. And do they start back feeding up the stream to figure out where the PFAS are coming from?
Again, that's really a deep DEP call. I mean, I don't want to speculate, but hopefully the results will come back, will indicate, perhaps some trends or locations at which to investigate further. But I don't want to speculate in terms of in an area that I'm not an expert in.
Okay.
Paul, the report referenced 60 Richardson Road, which had been an illegal junkyard, and it looks like that's privately owned right now.
Yes.
So are we just commenting about that piece of property, or is something actively being done with it?
I'm not aware of anything actively being done. That's been a known concern site, frequented by the Board of Health in prior years and so forth. And again, depending upon what comes out of our results, that may be an area where the DEP looks to for further investigation. But at this point in time, the work that we're doing, the town is doing, is contained to the town's property as well as the water district property that they wanted the wells on, which, as you can see in the report, there's one area that we couldn't do the stream crossing yet, but that work will be scheduled. But that additional property is a concern, has been a concern to the town and the water district for quite some time. But at this point, I'm not aware of any investigation at that property.
Okay, and the report also mentions an abutting land that was the former AOT plumbing land, or owned by AOT plumbing, and I'm still having trouble figuring out what that parcel is, but who owns it now?
It is 60, I believe.
No, it talked about 2 different things, I thought.
Can I butt in, Chairman?
Yes.
That is the same property.
Bruce, could you just state your name for the?
Yeah, Bruce Harper, Superintendent of the North Chelmsford Water District. Yeah, that property was acquired by Harry Ayotte back in the early 80s. So he did that was 5860. So I think 58 might be the back barn where he had his business.
Yeah.
And also it was occupied by Hallberg. It used to be a gas tank cleaning business. There was a body
dairy.
shop there. It's had a bunch of uses that were bad.
Bruce, is there anything else you wanted to say?
No, pretty much Paul covered it all. I did talk to Steve myself tonight. I just want to make sure we weren't going to get hit with something at 5:30, 6 o'clock. That seems that's when the reports have been coming forward. But as he said, there's nothing available as of yet, and it should be, as I know, because we do PFAS samples every month. It takes about 3 weeks to get results back. And by the time Paul McKinley gets them, Wesley Sampson plugs them in, it'll take a few more weeks anyways. So no, I'm satisfied to this point.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, thank you, Bruce.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and then the next item under reports and the final item is town meeting warrant article presentations. You may recall the board asked that we schedule the presentations. We have some this evening and then some in 2 weeks or your next meeting. We offered people, that are not working for the town a convenience. And this evening, we do have Vern Koneski regarding Article 27, the climate change resolution. And so at this point, I'll turn it over to Vern and we'll go from there.
I'll put that up for you.
Yeah, thank you. I want to thank the select board for inviting us tonight to give a report on our presentation on our article. The article.
Excuse me, Byrne. Could you just state your name or anybody else who's with you for the recording secretary?
Yeah, my name is Byrne Kosicki. I reside at 24 Garrison Road, and I'm the one who has submitted the petition for the town meeting Chelmsford climate resolution. Just as background, this resolution was put forth by a group of citizens, and we call ourselves the Chelmsford Climate Action Team down in the corner here. So can I have the next slide, please?
Mm-hmm.
So here's the full resolution. I'm not going to read it. I just want to direct your attention to the bolded part at the bottom. That's really the actionable part of the resolution. Be it resolved, the select board will charge a committee with studying and making recommendations for specific strategies and actions for Chelmsford to achieve a goal of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Next slide, please. So as background, we all know that climate change is driven by human-produced greenhouse gases and that it's a serious threat. And the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is a UN organization, has recommended net zero emissions by 2050 to escape the worst effects. And by net zero, what is meant is to reduce carbon producing emissions to a very low level by 2050, and then use carbon offsets for the remainder. That combination is called net zero. So Massachusetts has committed to a 30-year transition to net zero, and there's a roadmap called the Mass 2050 Decarbonization Roadmap. So our resolution article actually mirrors the state goal for our town. So it says that Chelmsford should take steps toward net zero emissions by 2050, and that a committee should be charged to study and make recommendations to reach that goal. I should point out that Chelmsford is not the first town to have such a resolution. There are similar resolutions and committees in other towns around Massachusetts. Next slide, please. So this is just a picture of, I grabbed it from the Massachusetts State environmental website, and it shows the cover of their decarbonization roadmap, just to show you that there is work in this. This is the result of a 2-year study, and this document is one of the guiding documents for the state. Next slide, please. So with this goal and the fact that Massachusetts has a net zero goal similar to this by 2050, question might be raised. So Massachusetts is already doing this. Why do we have to have the same goal? Why can't we just sit back and let Massachusetts take care of it? And then by 2050, everything will be fine. Next slide, please. Well, the Massachusetts goal really assumes that all towns and cities are also going to have to meet this net zero goal. If they don't, then Massachusetts obviously is not going to meet their goal either. So there is going to be a number of actions taken by the state to try to get this to happen. In other words, the Massachusetts government is not going to reach its goal unless the residents of Massachusetts also work to have this same goal. Next slide, please. The state is going to use incentives. Oops, back
Can we
up.
go back?
The state is going to use incentives to reach its goal. So towns with well-established climate plans are going to be best able to respond. By that, I mean that there has been discussion at state levels for qualifiers for towns to access grant funds. So a climate plan would be a good qualifier. I'm not sure that it's going to be required, but I want to point out that it would put us in good position to respond to these grants. Now, Chelmsford has been very successful in the green program grants that it's received over the years, and a lot of that success has come by Chelmsford being early in the line of people to ask for to apply to these green programs. And there's a list of different benefits that the Chelmsford has gotten here. I'm not going to read those, but you can read that yourself. So one main goal is the Chelmsford acquisition to incentives. The second main goal for the climate resolution is to position Chelmsford to be able to bargain with the state on actions that will affect the town. And this is best done in a coalition of other towns with similar plans. I just point out a couple of towns around us, our neighbors, Westford, Acton, and Pepperell, are going down this road already. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but probably there are on the order of 10% of the towns in Massachusetts that are now taking these kinds of actions. Next slide, please. Now, the climate resolution is a long-term commitment, obviously, unless we unexpectedly achieve our goal in a quick amount of time. I don't expect that to happen. The implementation would be through some town committee. That would be the body which would do the studying and recommending the actions. Specific tasks are listed here to assess where we stand right now on greenhouse gas emissions, develop a plan for Chelmsford to reach this net zero goal by 2050, and to promote actions for residents and businesses, and to make yearly recommendations to the town for actions that it can take. Now, this goes beyond the resolution a little bit, but this question was raised on previous run-throughs of these slides. What is the makeup of the committee? And this is based on experience of other towns and isn't called out in the resolution, but I thought I'd mention it here. Other towns have found that it's effective to start with all volunteer committees. And diverse membership is very important on the committee. We want to make sure that all a range of backgrounds, business, cultural, environmental, other backgrounds are represented on the committee. And this is important for the plan to represent the whole town. No funds are requested in our resolution. Next slide, please. So in summary, what's happening is that the state is already working on its 2050 program. Changes are coming, and those changes will affect all towns in Chelmsford also. The Chelmsford Net Zero Resolution calls out a number of actions that it will be taking, and that it be volunteer driven and at no cost to the town. And finally, the overall message is simple, that climate change is well underway, and the Massachusetts response is starting and changes are coming down the road. The resolution aims for Chelmsford to make plans to deal with this change. We will need a plan for transition to the future, to make this this transition as smooth as possible. So this is basically the first step in the road to this plan. Thank you very much. This is a backup slide, so we don't need that one.
Okay, do we have any comments or questions from the board?
So, yeah, I have a couple of questions. I guess maybe this is a question for Paul Cohen. Is this article binding?
No, technically a town meeting can't bind a the legislative body of town meeting can't bind the executive body of the town. So theoretically, the select board could choose not to appoint a committee. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing that the town meeting can do about that other than be unhappy about it if that's the resolution they pass. But no, it's not binding.
Well, I just wanted to kind of preface my comments, kind of about that, because I absolutely agree with the goals of this article. I guess my concern is, we have every meeting we read off the committees that have vacancies, including the recycling committee and the energy conservation committee. And Vern, you probably know that I've spoken to Badri Upiliapan about this. And it seems like there would be some overlap with what those two committees do, in addition to what the expectation would be for this one. So I would absolutely support this article, but I think when it comes time maybe to create that committee, we could look at what those other committees are also doing and see if maybe there's some way we could, maybe create one larger committee that has subcommittees that focus on different areas or something like that. I mean, that would be my only thought about it.
Yeah, the resolution doesn't require doesn't ask for a new committee,
Mm-hmm.
just a committee. So one option might be along the lines you suggest, that a new committee could be formed out of other committees or something like that. That would meet the spirit, I think, of the resolution.
Okay, like I said, I absolutely support it, but I just, I didn't want the proponents to think that I was, trying to pour any water on your goals, because they definitely are aspirational and something we should strive for.
I have a question. If this was approved in town meeting, could this just be tasked onto one of those other two existing committees?
Oh, I think so. If, for example, a committee is winding down its current charge.
Existing committees, town manager appointed, Paul? I think they are.
Yes, they are town manager appointed committees. But well, fine. I think
There's
I
nothing
expect
that, there's nothing that would preclude us from working together
no,
to
exactly. No,
do what
I
makes
expect
sense.
this. Yeah, I expect this will pass town meeting, and then once it passes, the other thing that we're waiting for is, as Byrne noted, the state enacted landmark legislation now about 2 months ago on climate change, and there are interim measures that are basically benchmarks in 2025, 2030, and so forth. Where I think everyone, including the committee and myself and others, are waiting to see when those benchmarks and guidelines come out, and that really will shape how we attack this. But yes, I think, well, you know, we can achieve the goal and spirit of what the resolution is trying to do here. As was noted, we've already made significant progress in the last 15 plus years or so.
Mark or George, do you have anything? No?
No, I think Pat's idea is a good one, you know, with all the vacancies we have, to try to find a way to put some of them together. And as some of those other priorities drop, maybe it becomes a little bit stronger in this area, but we'll see what happens.
George?
I'm all set. Thank you.
Yeah, my main question was, why do we need a town meeting vote? And if town meeting votes no, we could still do this. But I think it was answered. I think you're just looking for the support of town meeting behind it.
Well, it's a
Resolution.
It's a big commitment, you know. It will exceed the time that this select board is still in operation, and
Okay.
and the time that the town manager is here. So I think our feeling is that the full town should get behind this. I mean, and not just have it come down from the select board.
Okay. Is there anyone who feels they are not prepared to vote on this evening? Okay, then I'll entertain a motion.
Okay, so let me just get this open with the right wording here. I will make a motion that we approve the Chelmsford climate resolution as proposed.
We support.
Article 28.
Recommend
I'm sorry, we support Article 28.
We recommend approval.
Recommend approval of Article
There you go.
28.
It's been a while since we've done one of these, right? So, I'll make a motion that we recommend approval for Article 28.
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any more discussion? Okay, because we're remote, I'm going to do roll call. Pat,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Ken,
Aye.
and I vote aye, so that's 5-0. Thank you, Byrne. Good luck.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Community Development Director Evan Belansky, who will be presenting the zoning bylaw amendment warrant articles numbers 37 to 40. I also note that Tim Shanahan is on the call from the planning board as well.
Good evening. Good to see the board members. And as Paul mentioned, Chairman of the Planning Board, Tim Shanahan, has joined us this evening. But just as a way of background, this year's zoning process began on December 9th, where the Planning Board had an agenda item asking board members to identify any potential zoning items for spring town meeting. These three themes were identified. On January 20th, the board held a work session or a workshop to discuss and deliberate and wordsmith and workshop the initial draft. They opened their hearing on January 27th. That was continued to March 24th, at which time the board closed the public hearing. They did make an amendment to Article 38 and made their votes. Since then, late March and early April, the board and myself have presented to the Finance Committee, which brings us to this evening with the Select Board. So the first article, Article 37, relates to parking in the center village. This article proposes to revise the underlying center village zoning parking requirements, as well as the village center overlay district parking provisions. The article increases parking for non-residential uses within these two districts by increasing the parking ratio up to 80% from the current requirement of 50%. The current zoning bylaw currently has a by right 50%, a by right 50% reduction. So another way of saying this is that by right reduction is being reduced down to 20%. The Finance Committee thought the increasing the parking ratio up to 80% from 50% was easier to understand. There still remains a special permit which can be issued by the planning board to have a total parking reduction up to 50%. That's an existing provision in the zoning bylaw. This article was initiated by the planning board as they have expressed concerns related to providing adequate parking in the center. It should be noted that expansions to existing uses will be subject to these new provisions that most likely could be in the form of a restaurant expanding seating capacity. This article was endorsed by the Center Village Master Planning Committee, and the Planning Board voted this article via a vote of 7 in favor. Any questions on that article?
Any comments or questions from the board?
Evan, if this passes, this is going to require new, let's say a new restaurant. They're going to need more parking now?
Correct.
So if there's a rejuvenation of the downtown area and you get a flurry of new businesses, Bob's Coin Shop and maybe upstairs at, above the Bead Place or the steakhouse goes in, where do we get more parking spaces?
So most of the private properties currently comply with the 50% reduction. There are some which simply don't have parking or don't have enough parking to comply with the 50% reduction. Moving forward, if the board holds new proposals to 80% parking requirement, some proposals will physically not be able to comply. And then the board will have to take that into consideration.
Which board?
The planning board.
The planning board.
Yeah, I mean, the other piece that's being discussed between the Center Village Master Planning Committee and the planning board is what are the town's long-term options to obtain or manage or acquire additional parking in the center.
So am I understanding it correctly that this warrant article will handicap newer businesses?
It depends on the scope and scale. With the exception of a 100-seat restaurant, most existing and likely future restaurants are going to be much smaller in capacity. You just take a look at kind of existing square footage, unless there's transformative changes in the center with existing square footage. A lot of those tenant spaces are rather small. And those businesses, particularly the restaurants, Fishbones, Brick House, they either comply with the existing 50% requirement, or they exceed it. So it's difficult to project, what specific proposals are going to be forthcoming. But the notion that we're going to have, in addition to, an envisioned 100-seat restaurant, is difficult to imagine that there would be many more restaurants of that scope and scale in the center without significant changes.
Evan, could I say something? My video is down for some. Hello?
Yeah, could
We
you
hear you.
just make sure you state your name for the record?
Sure. Tim Shanahan, 18 Housatonic Ave, planning board member. Yes, I don't really think this is going to affect us at all because there really is no parking. So the difference, we can still give a waiver, but it's really not going to make much of a difference because we don't have any parking to give. But giving them that by right, we learned on this last project, is what we wanted to change.
And did the Center Village Committee discuss this with you or vote?
Yeah, they were
Yes,
at the. You go, Tim.
Evan. Well, as Evan, I think he said it earlier, they did. They did, yep.
They did participate in the planning board public hearing. Chairman Rigney did zoom in, and that was after his committee did discuss and take a vote.
Okay. Any other questions? Does anybody not feel prepared to vote on this one this evening? Okay, then I'll take a motion.
I will make a motion. I am muted. Let me just check.
No, you're
I will
not.
make a motion to recommend approval of Article 37.
Do I have a second? Can you unmute, Mark?
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, before we take a vote, I just want to comment that I'm going to vote against this because I think this parking in the center, people just sometimes either don't know where it is or don't want to look for it. It doesn't affect residential development. So as far as commercial development, I think we should have a maximum parking that's attached to new development. It seems that so many times that we end up just with large parking lots and half the day they're empty. So I'm going to vote against it.
Okay. Any other discussion before we vote?
Well, one comment. Excuse me. Is that it's probably not totally related, but there's some parking areas where people, there are only 30-minute limits, and a lot of people are abusing that, and they're keeping it for a couple of hours, etc. And they're holding up, some of the smaller shops like the coffee shop, new coffee shop, and places in that area where people are just, they're coming in, getting their bicycles off, they're leaving their car there and going down the bike paths and stuff like that. So, I think that's something that has to be policed a little bit, but I know that's not directly related to what we're talking about, but I just thought we'd bring it up. We've had a couple complaints this week.
Yeah, we've had complaints from patrons and also from business owners that people are sitting in the 30-minute parking spots to go use the bike trail or go to the restaurants for hours on end, or even overnight parking. So I do think that is something that we probably want to address outside of this discussion. Paul, I don't know if we could please maybe look at putting that on a future agenda and invite the Center Village Committee to come talk to us about parking and maybe provide a courtesy invite to the businesses as well, so that we can just have a conversation around that.
The traffic safety advisory committee is already on this. We expect that the report in 2 weeks will have a preliminary recommendation, which would then follow the steps that you just described, bring in the Center Village Committee,
Okay.
come back to you, and probably some form of a public hearing where we notify property owners of any proposed changes, as well as a holistic map that shows the parking in the center, the limitations and so forth. So yes, it'll be coming up as soon as your next meeting on May 3rd.
And will they also be addressing signage?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Ken, were you going to say something?
Paul, I know, just quickly, I know we're on a little bit of a tangent here, but could you also just maybe mention them 15-minute parking maybe for 3 of the spots, like in front of the coffee house, as a consideration, maybe 3:15, 3:30s, and then the hourlies, which are down by the barber shop, just to, just have them look into that. So when they come in front of us, we know that maybe all the options have been considered. Well,
okay. I'm sorry, Ken, are you ready to bring this back to the topic?
Yep.
Okay,
What I was
thank
going to
you.
say about the warning article was, I kind of was where Pat was until Tim made a point. I mean, this is going to give the ability to the planning board to give a waiver for the spot. So I think I'm going to vote in favor of this.
Okay. Any other discussion before we vote? Okay, I'll go by roll call. George?
Aye.
Pat?
No,
Mark?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
And I vote aye. So that's 4-1. Excuse me. Charts back up, Evan.
Okay, thank you. So Article 38 deals with the concept of e-commerce. This concept is identified in the draft 2020 master plan update. It is also identified in the Route 3 highway interchange real estate market study, of which the final report has been published. I believe the board has seen copies of that. So e-commerce is an emerging trend pre-COVID and has accelerated during COVID and is anticipated to continue to accelerate post-COVID. What this article intends to do is provide additional options for existing and new businesses to adapt to the rapidly changing consumer and market conditions. E-commerce is very likely ongoing in Chelmsford to some degree and extent. And during COVID, not only have consumers likely done more with e-commerce, but our local existing businesses have also likely increased their e-commerce. So this article is proposing to do a couple specific things. First is to define new uses and designate zoning districts where permissible. In doing so, the existing definition of retail, I should mention the existing retail zoning also likely permits e-commerce to some degree and extent. The article provides clarity and removes any confusion with creating specific regulation. Finally, it provides clear distinction between existing uses such as a transport terminal, which UPS is classified as, and a traditional warehouse distribution facility. So what this article intends to do is create new definitions. The first one is to revise the existing retail definition for purposes of clarifying a difference between traditional retail and e-commerce. Second definition is to define e-commerce, which will be defined as internet sales. That includes business to business and business to consumer. The third new definition is fulfillment center. This is essentially defined as a last mile bulk product warehousing and direct fulfillment. As a principal use, it is defined as a standalone facility that's not open to the public. There's a second type of fulfillment center that's being proposed and defined, which is a co-located facility as an accessory use to a retail use if under 30% of the total gross square footage. All of these definitions, again, should not be confused with existing uses such as transport terminal and/or warehouse as currently defined. The next new definition that's being proposed is a dark store. This is essentially a micro fulfillment center. It's a retail use not open to the public, and we're defining it as no larger than 10,000 square feet. And the final new definition is ghost kitchens. This is a commercial kitchen with no dining areas where the kitchen is preparing made to order and catered meals, and it may provide for customer pickup. Next slide, please. So what I do like to provide visual aids. I know there are some people who are able to understand zoning matters better with visual aids. So these are visual examples of 3 of the types of e-commerce uses that are being proposed. The first row is full-scale fulfillment centers characterized by floor-to-ceiling racks with bulk storage. That picking, as the industry calls it, can be done by robots. It can be done by people. The point is that it's a dedicated back of the house operation. The third and fourth slides are examples of existing traditional retail square footage being converted in their entirety to fulfillment centers. And this is happening across the country. The middle row is examples of co-located micro fulfillment centers. Again, these are examples of a back of the house, no more than 30% of the total gross square footage of a retailer being dedicated for bulk storage, rack and picking. So the one on the left is an example of a facility operated by, I believe it's Walmart up in Salem, New Hampshire. The 2 middle slides are examples of small locally owned and operated operations where they're doing back of the house picking and processing and boxing. The final slide is an example of a small business where they would provide the distribution directly to the customer. Either they have a fleet of vans that they own and operate, or they're hiring it out to a third party. The final row is examples of dark stores. What you see on the left is an example, the most prominent industry example, which is in the supermarket grocery industry. The middle appears to be some sort of liquor beverage packaging operation. And then the final 2 on the bottom right are, again, prominent examples of Amazon dark stores, smaller scale that move into existing shopping plazas. Gives you a sense of the scope, scale, and an example of either customer pickup or a fleet of contracted delivery vans. Next slide, please. So as part of the FinCom discussion, they had asked for specific examples in Massachusetts. I thought that was a good idea to provide some real world context. So the first one is an example of Amazon facilities. Again, Amazon is the most prominent in the industry at this point. It's a household name. However, their facilities range from something as small as 26,000 square feet to what many people envision, which is upwards of 800 to 1 million square feet. But again, with the smaller ones, that plays into their last mile business model. Stop and Shop, which is, does have a facility in Chelmsford, in Brockton, has closed a facility and has transitioned it or converted it to an online fulfillment center for deliveries and curbside pickup. Another example, Stop and Shop in Whitman, Mass. They converted a 40,000 square feet to a dark store, and that was on the former site of a full service grocery store. I had mentioned Walmart earlier. They are actively doing this at their superstore in Salem, New Hampshire. That pilot program has been successful, and they are contemplating moving that to their national portfolio. As it pertains to ghost kitchens, the Bertucci's in Chelmsford is currently operating several ghost kitchens in partnership. Those are with Mr. Biesberger as well as Guy Fieri's Flavortown. And then the final bullet here is speaking to the Guy Fieri ghost kitchen kind of trends in greater Boston area. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the first step in this article is to create new definitions. The second part is to then revise the use table to determine where the community feels as though these uses would be appropriate, and if so, how they would be permitted. So the upper left corner shows the use table for dark stores and ghost kitchens. What is being proposed is to allow dark stores. The CA is the neighborhood commercial. That is best described across from the Westlands on Chelmsford Street. The CB is roadside commercial. That is primarily highlighted Littleton Road, portions of Middlesex Street, portions of Tingsboro, and the north side of Drum Hill. That is proposed to be a special permit from the planning board. CC is shopping center. That is Drum Hill, where the Walmart Plaza is, as well as the Andiamo's Nobo's Plaza in the center. Dark stores are proposed to be by right. In the CD district, which is the dark purple, that's Chelmsford Street coming in from 495 to the center, as well as Vinyl Square and the gateways leading into Vinyl Square. Dark stores are prohibited. In the center village, dark stores are prohibited. And in the IA Limited Industrial, which is primarily Route 129, portions of River Neck Road, portions of Glen Ave and Katrina Road, Technology Drive, and portions in and around Vinyl Square, as well as a component in South Chelmsford. The dark stores are permitted by right. When I mentioned by right, I should mention, and it's mentioned in the next slide, by right will likely trigger site plan approval from the planning board. If you could just go back to the previous slide. So the exercise is similar for ghost kitchens, and then on the right-hand side is the use table for fulfillment centers. Under accessory fulfillment, CD, the N was highlighted as part of the FinCom deliberations or presentations, because at the time, the planning board working with the the North Village Master Planning Committee was still discussing it. As I mentioned at the last planning board meeting, the board did vote to modify the warrant as published, and has specifically put the N for prohibited on the CD for accessory fulfillment centers. In doing so, the planning board had tried to figure out a way to still allow this opportunity in other CD zoning districts. So what the planning board has voted, which will hopefully be in the FinCom warrant book and presented at Springtown meeting, is a footnote in the use table that would allow accessory fulfillment centers in the CD district along Chelmsford Street from 495 to the CV zoning district. Next slide, please. So realizing that that's a lot of information, the Finance Committee asked a lot of questions. So this slide basically reflects many of the questions that FinCom asked, and it provides a broader context related to general concerns that may be associated with this opportunity. So the first one is that any project over 20,000 square feet requires a major business complex special permit from the planning board. The second item is that the proposed use table is consistent with existing uses in existing zoning districts, meaning that we're relying on the existing zoning map. We're not making changes to the existing zoning map. E-commerce uses are very similar to the existing permitted uses, meaning retail, warehouse, fast food, and restaurants. Those uses are already within the existing use table, and they're already permitted to some degree within these existing zoning districts. With the exception of a principal use fulfillment center, all other uses are very likely to be reusing existing square footage. Principal use fulfillment centers would likely contemplate demolition of an existing structure and new construction. Finance Committee was trying to figure out or get a sense for the range. So under current zoning, the maximum square footage per acre ranges from 19,602 square feet, which is our by right FAR, up to 29,185 square feet, which requires a special permit for increased floor area ratio from the planning board. Final item is that principal use fulfillment centers, by definition, they target locations within close proximity to highway access. So for purposes of the Chelmsford, this is primarily associated with Route 129 and Technology Drive. For refresher, the use tables as proposed are included here. And the reason for this is just to reiterate that, again, for purposes of dark stores and ghost kitchens, retail stores are currently permitted in the CA, CB, and CC districts, with the characteristics related to hours, traffic, things of that nature are consistent and compatible. Fast food restaurants are currently permitted in the CB and CC districts, and traditional sit-down restaurants are currently permitted in the CB, CC, CD, and CV zoning districts. And as it pertains to fulfillment centers, warehouse is currently permitted in the CB and IA zoning districts, and retail is currently permitted in the CB and CC districts. I should also mention that under zoning, we do not regulate hours of operation. All businesses, particularly warehouse, are able to operate 24/7 unless there is some sort of restriction placed on the particular use by the planning board, or in some cases, the zoning board. Retail and restaurants, I think, are governed. Certainly restaurants are governed by the hours of operation that the select board places on them. And I'm not certain about traditional retail hours of operation. Next slide, please. Okay, so that concludes Article 38. Be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions from the board?
So Evan, in a case like, for example, Bertucci's, where they had a CVL and they're a restaurant, and then they start doing this dark kitchen function or whatever you call it. would they then have to go to the planning board and get a special permit for that, even though they're already, doing their regular business there?
Yeah, so the Bertucci's is a not the best example for purposes of the zoning exercise. I mention it because it's the concept that exists in Chelmsford, but for purposes of zoning, it wouldn't be classified as a ghost kitchen per our definition. I don't want to get into the weeds with this, but essentially what Bertucci's is doing is the Bertucci's employees, their existing cooks, are cooking these food items for these two ghost kitchen entities. So that is if the Bertucci's was closed completely, if they shut down completely and they went to our definition as we're proposing a ghost kitchen, no dining room, and completely virtual operation, then that would require a special permit from the planning board. So what Bertucci's is doing is it's an industry hybrid, but it's the best example and the most prominent example on a regional and national level that we have. I can provide the board, Boston Globe articles that talk about real dark kitchens, ghost kitchens. Those are primarily mom and pop establishments, local entities, regional entities that have decided for business purposes to shut down their dining room and convert or reopen as a ghost kitchen. There's also literature about national entities going into the ghost kitchen business. Grubhub is a good example. But yeah, the Bertucci's one was just used to show that this concept is not foreign to Chelmsford, that there are existing entities that are already transitioning or introducing this concept into their business models.
Okay, and I guess, kind of to get to the others, some of the others too that you talked about, it seems like in the situation that we're in right now with COVID, it seems like there's a lot of, I guess I would call it overlap. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of e-commerce, like you go to Staples, you can either go in there and you can, pick your own products off the shelves, or you can call or email or go online and order whatever you want, and then you go and you pick it up curbside or it's delivered. It seems like there's a lot of mixture there as it is. So I guess how is that going to be handled?
Yeah, so good point. So again, the e-commerce that we're proposing is not the e-commerce that you as a consumer are referencing. That is a type of e-commerce. It's currently going on from the consumer and from the business side. But what we're proposing is the traditional e-commerce where you have back of the house dedicated floor space that's not open to the public, that businesses are dedicating for a bulk storage, shipping, packaging, and delivery. So I'm not aware of any examples that exist in Chelmsford at this point. Many businesses may continue to do exactly what you're suggesting, where they are taking an order via the internet, and they have an employee going onto the retail floor and picking the order, and then bagging it, and then either having a delivery service deliver it or providing customer pickup. So that currently is not defined as e-commerce. What we're proposing is where businesses from a market perspective truly want to make the transition to remove existing retail square footage and make their e-commerce side of the business more robust. Again, we're not aware of any businesses that currently do this. We haven't received any inquiries for businesses that are interested in doing this. But this article is intended to provide existing businesses and future businesses with that opportunity, understanding the rapidly changing market conditions within the traditional retail space.
Okay, it just seems like you're adding a lot of different categories here, and it seems like a lot of them potentially could overlap, which I guess is not a bad thing. I guess there's no downside to that, but
Yeah, so if you read the actual warrant, you'll see we're revising the existing definition of retail, and then creating these new definitions. Once that's done, the overlap the overlap is kind of separated. And we clearly distinguish between the e-commerce you're referring to and then the e-commerce that people are using, again, as it pertains to a traditional, internet sales, where the packages or the product is being shipped to you, or delivered to you.
okay, thanks.
Anyone else? If not, I have a few questions. So you said this is part of the draft master plan. Has that master plan been through any review or iteration cycles yet outside of the committee?
Not outside the committee. So I had mentioned, I think I phrased it as concepts identified in the master plan.
Okay.
The first iterations of this PowerPoint did reference it as a recommendation. That has since been revised. I think it was a planning board member, Mr. Walsh, who brought this up and asked the same question. So I have since rephrased the PowerPoint to make it clear that the concept has been codified in the draft 2020 master plan, and that no other board or committee has reviewed that yet. Between now and town meeting, the master plan committee may very likely get some of these drafts to the planning board.
Okay. And so one of the other things I just wanted some clarification on is we went back and forth getting the auxiliary fulfillment center back to where the original Vinyl Square committee vote was, which was no in the CD district, which is what Vinyl Square is, plus where it extends to. And then the planning board added the exception for the CD district from 495 up to the center village zoning. And I'm trying to understand what you or the planning board would contemplate putting there in terms of accessory fulfillment, or what buildings or businesses might need that type of capability. And the reason that I ask is that you're starting to get very, very close and on top of the center of Chelmsford, where all those intersections come together. And I'm concerned about adding accessory fulfillment centers that far away from the highway and possibly adding more truck traffic, other traffic in an area that's already very congested, that does have some residential areas around it, and also has the ball fields there, frankly, where there's kids there all summer. So I'm just trying to understand what the rationale was for adding that strip back in.
Sure.
And what you would envision, what businesses or buildings there you would envision using that, should it pass.
Mm-hmm. So a couple thoughts here. Again, the accessory fulfillment requires a special permit from the planning board. It's 30% of an existing retail establishment. So accessory retail cannot be standalone. It has to be part of an existing retail establishment. So if you look along Chelmsford Street, one of the largest retail spaces is the vacant former Med Express. That's an 8,000 square foot tenant space. So no more than 30% of that could be converted to accessory fulfillment associated with principal retail use. So from a scope and scale perspective, the accessory really is intended to serve the small, locally owned and operated businesses in town who truly believe that having a dedicated bulk storage back of the house operation is in their best interest. Personally, and I know this was workshopped with the planning board and there were varying opinions. Personally, I think this opportunity should have been provided to every business in town. Unfortunately, the way the article evolved, this opportunity, if passed by town meeting, will be afforded to certain businesses in certain locations and not others. And Vinyl Square, North Chelmsford is a good example. So with setting that aside, these small locally operated establishments within the scale of 30% or up to 30%, it's likely going to be either a van fleet that they own and operate themselves, or they're going to hire it out to a third party that would likely use a van fleet. So the notion or the vision that there would be increased truck traffic, 18-wheeler traffic within these existing commercial districts based upon the scope and scale of existing development, to me, it doesn't seem as though it's likely. These businesses, as Pat mentioned, can currently do delivery. So a business in Chelmsford, a liquor store, a restaurant, if they wanted to have their own a fleet of vans, they currently can do that. What they can't do right now is they can't ramp up a portion of their business that is solely based upon traditional bulk storage e-commerce. So this article again provides them that opportunity, but everything else related to characteristics, while businesses currently aren't doing it, they have the legal ability to do robust delivery. And I think, as Pat mentioned, during the last year of COVID, many of those businesses, existing businesses, have turned to delivery service. Supermarkets are delivering, pharmacies are delivering, hardware stores deliver either from employees using their own personal cars or doing, customer pickup.
Thank you, Evan. So the other question that I had relates to the full fulfillment centers, not the accessory. And there was commentary in something I read in our meeting packet about, for example, if something like this were to go into the 129 area, what would likely have to happen is existing buildings would be demolished in order to create the 30,000 or whatever, however many thousand square feet for a fulfillment center. Is this the type of thing that was contemplated or intended when the 129 overlay district was put in place, where you might have these large sprawling buildings and a 24/7 operations? And again, this time I think it would be additional truck traffic and probably lower wage jobs than bringing in some of the high tech or the biotech that I know we've been focusing on in other areas.
Yeah, so that's a great question. From my perspective, the zoning strategy over the last 10 years, prior to the 129 overlay, if you recall, we did a green communities zoning where we expanded the definition of research and development. My point being is that the zoning strategy for the last 10 years, townwide and specifically in 129, has been to provide as many opportunities for different types of uses that the marketplace may have an interest in locating in Chelmsford. The strength of 129 over the last 30 years has been we've never put all of our eggs in one basket. We don't specialize in any one particular thing. And that has served the town very, very well. While the 129 overlay contemplates a specific vision of baseline amenities that support key industry clusters, and well-paying jobs. Our current zoning already allows for warehouse distribution, of which we have some. This article, in my opinion, is another example of trying to identify new uses in which similar type communities located at the intersection of two major highways where the industry may have an interest in having a discussion with the planning board. As I mentioned, likely locate as close to a highway interchange as possible. As you mentioned, likely a 24/7 operation. Amazon, which is again the most prominent in the industry, is characterized by vans doing the deliveries, and they do have 18-wheeler coming in that are doing deliveries to the facility, but not out to the consumer. So, you know, I think the article at the end of the day is proposing an opportunity for proposals to take place based upon and within a special permit process. I should also mention, it'll be my final comment, and I've mentioned this to Finance Committee, the challenge with 129 has been well over a decade. We've averaged over 500,000 square feet of vacant space for a decade. And that's been problematic, and it remains problematic. So while we're making great progress, and you hear that from Lisa's quarterly reports, it's still not a given that the existing 700,000 square feet of vacant space just automatically fills up. It's going to be incremental. With that being said, this article does two things strategically. It provides a real-world opportunity for property owners and end users to consider long-term viability uses for our remaining large office buildings. Those are the most problematic. Those are well documented. Lisa tells you what those are. The other piece is that the facility that Analog operates on Mill Road will be going vacant. They're moving all their operations to Wilmington. So that's another large non-office square footage, but a very large building. So this article, again, in my opinion, provides to the suite of opportunities that the town offers, with the understanding that it's within a special permit process.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Does anyone not feel prepared to vote this evening? Okay, then I'll take a motion. Just a clarification, Evan, do you want us to vote on the recommended amendment? Is that going to be presented to town meeting?
Yes, like I said, that was presented to FinCom. Hopefully, hopefully their motion acknowledged that, and hopefully their warrant book puts in the planning board modification.
Okay.
If for some reason it doesn't, then the PowerPoint at town meeting certainly will, and it will be identified accordingly.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to recommend approval for Article 38.
I'll second.
Any other discussion before we vote? Okay, roll call. Pat?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Hang on a second, Evan.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. So Article 39 relates to non-medical marijuana. So the first bullet clearly indicates that the current zoning currently permits medical marijuana related to treatment facilities, and it also prohibits all forms of non-medical uses. This article continues the prohibition on retail sales, but is proposing to allow the accessory or supportive uses to retail as defined by the Mass Cannabis Control Commission. There are 7 new uses that the article is proposing to specifically define. The first one is a cultivator. These uses, I should mention, as defined in the zoning, specifically reference the Cannabis Control Commission's definitions. It's essentially a copy and paste job. So for purpose of presentation, a cultivator, as defined by the state, is an indoor or outdoor cultivation. They have specific criteria. If it's an outdoor facility related to some of its design features. At Finance Committee, there was some discussion as to whether cultivation, particularly outdoor, is an agricultural use. The Cannabis Control Commission specifically indicates that outdoor cultivation is not an agricultural use for purposes of Massachusetts. Second use is a cooperative. They are able to cultivate, obtain, manufacture, process, package, brand, and transfer. Third is a manufacturer. They're allowed to process and package. A micro business is defined as either a cultivator or a manufacturer or both. Next one is a testing facility used for certifications and testing within the industry. Next one is a transporter. They're allowed to store, sale, and distribution to retailers. And the final accessory use is research. They're allowed to cultivate, purchase, acquire for research purposes. All of these uses would require a select board host community agreement. That is a term and a process that is defined and further regulated within the Cannabis Control Commission's regulations and procedures. They also would require state approvals from the Cannabis Control Commission. And for purposes of this zoning article, they would all require a special permit from the planning board. At FinCom, there was some discussion as to what is the purpose, who serves as the gateway. The Cannabis Control Commission has indicated to me that a signed host community agreement is required prior to any application to the state commission. Within that process, the select board can decide what that local process entails. So, for example, that local process could entail joint meetings with the planning board. It could require application of the special permit to the planning board. It could require a public hearing and a butter notification within the select board's process. It could require engagement with town officials. So the Cannabis Control Commission does not restrict or further define or regulate what a local community host agreement process should be or could entail. What it does mention is that there are a variety of issues that are within local jurisdiction. First one is a negotiation of a community impact fee of up to 3% of gross annual sales. That would be applicable to any of the accessory uses that are doing sales into the industry supply chain. Security measures are the second one. Odors and nuisances is the third. There was some discussion at FinCom and Planning Board about odor. A quick Google search does indicate that active carbon filters, charcoal filters, and biofiltration are industry best practices and standards. Next item would be traffic.
Excuse me, Evan.
Yes.
Part of the odor discussion was with outdoor cultivation. So how would those types of technologies help with that?
Yeah, I agree.
My understanding is there's a period of like 1 or 3 months or something like that where you will smell odor during this cultivation process as the crop
Yeah.
matures.
Yeah, I agree. I have not come across any specific research that contemplates or talks about, using technology for odor control for outdoor cultivation. As I mentioned to FinCom, the cultivator is defined by the state to allow indoor and outdoor. And I simply, from the first workshop back in January, February, included that. And as you recall, if you look at the warrant, specifically call out that it also includes outdoor. Along the planning board process, there was some discussion about outdoor. They had a subject matter expert come in and speak specifically to outdoor. Finance committee continued to ask questions. But to this point, outdoor is still within the proposal. I think it was asked at FinCom whether outdoor was either asked at planning board or FinCom whether we had to include outdoor, and my response was no. It's a local option. But I don't disagree with you.
Okay, I didn't mean to
Nope,
derail you.
understood. Yep. So the final two issues that can be a part of a local consideration, traffic and diversion to minors. An example of diversion to minors is part of the community host agreement. Very often communities will negotiate partnerships and financial contributions and programming with the police department and Board of Health or other community nonprofits. A final item that's not part of the slide, but was somewhat discussed during FinCom was proximity to schools. And it turns out that the Cannabis Control Commission does have a 500-foot setback from public and private schools that offer kindergarten through grade 12. It does not include child daycare facilities, but public and private schools that again offer kindergarten 1 through 12 grades. And they have a specific kind of definition as to how that 500 feet is measured. Next slide, please.
Can I ask a quick question, Evan, while you were here? I just think it's pertinent here. What about fire and rescue?
As you likely know, any application to the planning board does get automatically distributed for comment to our technical town departments, police, fire, Board of Health. So the fire prevention office provides comment. In some cases, it's code issues. In other cases, it's general concerns associated with a particular use. Any of these types of uses, since they would be new uses and likely modifying or rehabbing existing square footage, would likely trigger the need for sprinklers, internal sprinklers. And that's something that fire prevention provides comment into the planning board process, to make sure that that the applicant understands what any upgrades that may be required in order to receive a building permit and then a occupancy permit. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I just surprised that it wasn't there as an issue as security was, because it does seem like there could be a significant impact, not just on the building and the structure, but also on a response to the different types of permits that you could have, whether it's an outdoor cultivator or an inside testing facility. It's a totally different challenge for fire and safety and rescue.
I understand. Yeah. So if you're speaking specifically to outdoor cultivation, I recall, I think the subject matter expert at the planning board talked about security, perimeter fencing, surveillance, as well as needing fire suppression to be on site, as well as irrigation, things of that nature. And then they did mention something about abilities to do odor control.
I had a similar question as Mark that probably hasn't been answered by the sprinkler answer, which is, I personally just don't understand what's involved in research and testing applications. So does that require any kind of special skills or training for the fire department? Because we're finding, like when Thermo Fisher went in, Chief Ryan said, yeah, there is some additional training we're going to have to deal with the types of things that could occur in this type of business. So I would just offer that as an extension to the fire question.
Right. So I can't answer these questions specifically. What I can tell you is that as part of the select board's host community agreement process, I think these are the exact types of questions that the board could engage with, the technical departments, as well as the proponent, and then to obtain kind of verification and confirmation that not only the board and community's concerns are addressed, but that any technical industry standards related to departments, as you mentioned, a new use may trigger training for the fire department. So that's a good example.
Right, just so you know, I was thinking training, equipment, and staffing.
Exactly. So between the host community agreement and the special permit, that would provide the community enough kind of regulatory oversight and authority to either negotiate or require as part of a contemplated approval.
Okay.
Okay. So next slide is some examples of existing non-retail accessory uses within the Greater Lowell area. These are either approved or pending licenses taken directly from the Cannabis Control Commission's publicly accessible website. As you can see, some of our neighboring communities are actively, in this area of land use and zoning. And there's a diverse range of businesses that are either principally involved in accessory uses or in combination with a retail license. So that's it's more for informational purposes. Okay. So this slide is again the second part of the article. First part was to define the uses. A second part is to identify what zoning districts and where in town these opportunities would be permitted. As I mentioned, anywhere the opportunity is permitted requires a special permit from the planning board. The accessory uses as currently proposed are to be allowed in the CB roadside commercial by special permit and the IA limited industrial by special permit. CB on the zoning map is the medium green color, located along Littleton Road heading out towards Westford. Middlesex Street heading out from Lowell, portions of Tingsboro Road heading out from Vinyl Square, portions of Princeton Street heading into Vinyl Square, the north side of Drumhill Road, and a portion of Chelmsford Street where the hotel, the gas station, and the restaurant are located. And there are portions of CB and South Chelmsford Village. Light and limited industrial, as I mentioned previously, primarily Route 129, Technology Drive, portions of Watton Street outside of Vinyl Square, portions of Tingsboro Road, north side of Groton Road on the Westford town line, and a small portion in South Chelmsford.
Evan, on the map, which color are we looking at? Is it the gray, the purple?
The IA Limited Industrial is the gray color.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
And CB roadside is the green hatched.
Sorry, I got a line here. Is that like the lime green?
Yes. Not the light green. Those are open spaces. So the darker green, that's hatched. Yes. You see that one on Littleton Road as you're heading out towards Westford? Exactly.
Is it like pea green?
Yes, that's a good description.
So it's those, and then the gray.
Correct.
So I'm just going to go to your first map here where it shows North Chelmsford.
Am I okay to stop sharing, or did you still want to look at this map?
I'm still looking at the map, but I just
Okay.
want to make sure I understand which areas we're like. But North Chelmsford in the first one you put up there, it's all the gray one, and then is that the dark green that's to the right of the gray and kind of wrapped around the gray there?
Yes. That's Tingsboro Road,
Okay.
in Middlesex and Princeton.
Yeah, you can't really see the road. I guess you can see 3A in the.
Correct.
Okay.
Oops, sorry.
So I should
And-
also
so
mention.
just as an example, so when you come in 3A and you come into where North ends and Princeton starts, there's a little section of dark green hatched there, right? Is that
Correct.
that's the corner of like Richardson? Okay, I just want to make sure I understand how to read these. So, all right, I'm good.
Yeah, I should also mention at the beginning of this process, I did reach out to the police chief and director of Board of Health just to update them accordingly so that they had time to consider. And to date through this process, I'm not aware of any engagement that they may have taken.
So Evan, I have a couple of questions. You mentioned the 500-foot setback from schools. Is it 500 feet from the edge of the property or from the building, or?
Yeah, it's a good question. I had to ask myself. So Cannabis Control Commission defines the measurement as follows: from the center of the cannabis use to the front entrance, or the primary front entrance of the school, as measured in a straight line, unless there is a physical obstruction. So their measurement is not property line to property line, as we normally do under local zoning. It gives you an indication that they were where communities thought that the use was appropriate. Cannabis Control Commission was not viewing their 500-foot measurement as an unnecessary or unreasonable restriction. It's a fairly liberal way to do a measurement.
I would say so, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, if you look at like in South Chelmsford near the Byam School, I mean, that would mean, Maxwell's basically could have something, because it would probably be 500 feet till you get to the front door of the
Yeah,
school.
I did do the measurement from Lockheed Martin, because that's the example that has come up. It's certainly more than 500 feet. I think it was closer to 750. While the measurement is interesting, these uses by definition are not open to the public. And I gave you the list. If you were to Google Earth these locations in other communities, they're fairly nondescript locations. They may have a sign outside, but they're not advertising themselves like a retail dispensary would. They're locating in nondescript areas, very often industrial areas, in nondescript buildings, and in doing so, they seem to be keeping a fairly low profile to the point where if you drove by, you wouldn't necessarily know what's going on in the buildings.
Okay, my second question is about impact fees. I've heard a couple instances recently where businesses have sued the community that they're in, saying that the impact fees are too high and they're not, basically they're not justified. Have you heard anything about that, and do they have to be justified?
What you're referring to is what I would refer to as the kind of the first generation of community host agreements, where communities leveraged the opportunity and ended up negotiating percentages higher than 3%. Since then, you've likely read where the Cannabis Control Commission has issued statements and tightened up their process. So my understanding is that is frowned upon, and it's as far as the Cannabis Control Commission is concerned, it's not permitted. So if this were to be adopted at town meeting and an entity did engage with the select board, my expectation, again, working with counsel or special counsel, would be that the maximum would be up to 3%, not to exceed 3%.
Pat, could I interject a follow-up question related to that?
Sure.
So Evan, I reviewed the guidance on the Cannabis Control Commission's website, the guidance for municipalities, the guidance for host community agreements, and all the documents they had. In the guidance for host community agreements, there is actually a statement that says, be aware that host community agreements are subject to federal and state law enforcement agency scrutiny to ensure fairness and transparency available to all applicants of all types. There's also a statement related to the 3% that classifies it as up to 3% for, quote, reasonably related to the costs imposed upon the municipality by having the business in the municipality. So does that relate to Pat's question in terms of how do we identify what are our imposed costs for a given business to come in? And then is that subject to being contested as being inflated even at the 3% level?
I understand the question now. So I would suggest that as part of your process, you would likely reach out to town departments, particularly police and fire. Based upon the specific proposal, the scope and scale of the proposal, what they're doing, the size, the police department may want to, again, talk about details at certain times. They may be asked to provide security at certain times. I can tell you that my outreach to my peer in Tingsboro, they have, their select board has recently negotiated 2 community host agreements with indoor cultivators. Both resulted in a 3% of total revenues. So I've not done a deep dive as to what their methodology was. But I agree that Cannabis Control Commission, does outline that it has to be reasonable, similar to a town application fee that either the select board imposes or the planning board imposes, that it's has some sort of direct nexus to the services that are being provided. So I think that's something that.
Well, and it requires that those costs be documented as a public record.
Correct. So we've done that exercise with our fee schedules, and I'm assuming we can continue to do that while this is a new use. There's likely police and fire, either routine inspections or annual inspections. I don't know enough about the specifics of the industry to answer, this specific question.
Okay,
It does provide, we're aware of the framework and the opportunity to, within that process, for the select board working with other town entities to, cover costs, so to speak, up to 3%.
thank you.
Evan,
I'm sorry,
is
Pat, did you
the
have,
chief- Excuse me, I'm sorry.
go ahead, George.
I was just asking how much contact you've had with Chief Spinney. Has he been involved in any, deep discussions with this type of thing? Because I think he was,
So,
I think originally a few years back, he was kind of not so hot on the deal.
so as I mentioned, when this process first began, reached out and met with the chief and Board of Health. They are still opposed to retail sales. This article is not changing the prohibition. Retail sales will continue to be prohibited. The chief, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he seemed to not have the same or similar concerns with these accessory uses as he does with retail sales. Board of Health, I think, was a little more cautious. They may be contemplating creating regulation. I think they were going to look into how other boards of health deal with some of these accessory uses. More recently, the chief did circle back with me, and he told me he did receive several inquiries from residents, town meeting reps. And based upon that, the chief informed me that he did reach out to some of his peers in other communities to learn more about this particular use and industry. He didn't share any particular concerns with me. And as I mentioned, I'm not aware of any specific concerns being expressed within the public process to date, planning board, finance committee, or this evening with the select board.
Thank you. I'm sure he'll probably make a recommendation when it's going to finally go to town meeting. Maybe, I don't know. Somebody will ask him for one, I'm sure. I don't know. Thank you.
So I just had one other, I don't know if it's a question or a comment, Evan. I've also read recently that with so many other states now allowing retail sales of non-medical marijuana, that the income, the revenue that municipalities are seeing is going down. Do you have any comment or thoughts on that?
I do not. Again, my direct outreach to date was with the town of Tingsboro. The two cultivators that the select board has a community host agreement with, the proponents' projections were $5 million of revenue upon, within the first year or so. My general take on this is that it's very location dependent. That retailers, as well as accessory uses that are servicing the retail cannabis, are looking to locate as close to highway interchanges as possible, so that they can be, within close proximity to their users or marketplace. So while Tingsboro is a good location, Chelmsford is probably a better location. And for certain types of accessory uses, that may result in increased revenue. But I don't disagree with you. We're kind of late to the game, so to speak. But there's lots of communities and lots of proposals. I'm not sure anyone can predict kind of the future landscape of this industry.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
I think they're getting into it for the wrong reason, though. Personally, I think that we're doing it strictly for financial reason. I think it's the wrong thing to get involved with for strictly financial. But every other town is doing it. And the reason that the income has gone down, I'm sure, is because there's so many more stores. There's 3 alone in Lowell. Now Tingsboro's got 1 or 2. Tewksbury or whatever, everybody seems to be popping up with one. Now we're contemplating it. So obviously, the more stores there are, the less revenue there is to share. So
Just a follow-up comment on that. The planning board did not discuss the revenue component of this. The planning board has been on record numerous times that they do not zone for revenue purposes. In fact, it was never discussed. The first time revenue came up was at FinCom, and a similar response that I'm providing to you this evening. So from a zoning strategy, I think it's same as the e-commerce. The planning board, the master plan, and the zoning strategy over the last 10 years has attempted to identify new uses where there seems to be a market interest and demand that the planning board feels as though could be zoned appropriately within the community and provide protections. The planning board did not do an ethical or moral debate on this. Finance committee didn't seem to get into that territory either. Certainly, between now and town meeting, some members may view this as a moral or ethical decision. But from a zoning perspective, it's being treated no differently than any other use where the impacts are fairly understood. There's a special permit process to deal with a case-by-case basis in unique neighborhood conditions and have the planning board be able to reasonably mitigate or minimize impacts with conditions.
Evan, I'm just going to pull. Are there any more questions for Evan? I had one or two others, but I want to give the other board members.
Did I mention something, Virginia?
Sure.
Tim Shanahan, 18 Housatonic, the planning board. We didn't talk about the revenue as much, but Pat, I was just wondering where you read about it declining, the revenue declining, because I've read other things to the opposite. So I was just curious where you read that.
There was an article, I believe it was either yesterday or today's Globe, specifically about the western part of the state, because they were talking specifically about New York legalizing recreational marijuana, and there was some concern that it was going to impact the revenue in towns out there. So, and I imagine that's.
So it's not around here though. That's all. I was just curious on where that was from.
Right.
Okay. So any other questions from the board? Okay, I had a question, Evan. During one of the planning board meetings, one of the planning board members made a comment about the state of Mass, maybe including agriculture in the outdoor definition in the future. And I'm not sure if I heard that right, but is there something being contemplated where agriculture would be included?
I think that may have been Nana Arroway. I don't think she was referring to Massachusetts. I think she was referring to the federal level.
Okay.
I'm not following that.
Okay, that's fine. So I guess just a couple of comments. There are other things in the guidance to municipalities. For example, the board can determine a limit on the number of establishments, up to 20% of the liquor licenses that are held for that town. There's things in there about, you can start to address signage. And Mark's asked questions about the fire department. We've had questions about the Board of Health, about the police department. I am not opposed to some of the indoor uses. I am not comfortable with the outdoor cultivation for a number of reasons. I feel that Chelmsford is already very densely populated. We talked about the odor and some other things. The way this is written, Watton Farms would fall under the ability to cultivate outdoors by special permit. And I think that is just far too close to residents and other areas. We don't have outdoor spaces that are removed from the main density of the town. We're pretty much built out already. So I have concerns about outdoor cultivation, and also knowing that it doesn't have to be contiguous. So what I read was you could have like up to 3 non-contiguous canopies for a single company. And I appreciate what the expert said when he came to the planning board. I know there was also some question about whether he had been already talking to the town, because he made that comment. And I just, in the interest of transparency, this is the same company, I believe, that sent a request in to do outdoor cultivation on agricultural property in town, which is not permitted by our bylaws. And that came in sometime last fall. But I'm still concerned about the outdoor cultivation piece because of the odor, because of the proximity to residents, people, schools, even if it's more than 500 feet. That's just my personal concern. In terms of some of the indoor applications or the outdoor, if it passes, the concern that I have is I'm feeling like this is being a little bit rushed, and that maybe we would be better off delaying this one until fall town meeting. And the reason that I say that is things like the host community agreement. As a select board member, shame on me for not researching it earlier, but the first time I heard about that was on a PowerPoint chart sometime in February or March, as the planning board was pulling their zoning articles together. And then we've had questions about the fire department, the police department, the Board of Health. And I'm worried that this goes through, we get an applicant, all of a sudden we have to put a host community agreement in place that has all these other stakeholders that have to play into it. And we're just not prepared to do that. So I personally would be more comfortable if we were taking an approach that said we were having some joint meetings with the police department, the fire department, the planning board, and the Board of Health to talk through some of this and understand as an entity how we're going to approach this and kind of have our ducks in line before that first applicant comes in when the zoning is passed. They also mentioned on the cannabis control website that if you want to pass zoning in advance of some of these other things being more clearly understood, you could put a moratoria on the zoning bylaw. And put a holding period on being able to exercise under that so that the municipality could take the time to do that. So I defer to the other board members, but that's my main concern. I'm not necessarily opposed to looking progressively at supporting the industry and the research and the testing aspects, especially with the indoor facilities. But I'm just wondering if we would be better off as a community putting this on the table for fall town meeting and taking some time to have some joint discussions with the other stakeholders.
Well, I guess, I'll respond to that. I totally agree with what you said about the outdoor cultivation. I think it's, in addition to the issues that you raised, it's so much more difficult to secure than if it's indoors. So I think that's critical. I think I didn't realize, or I hadn't really thought about putting the moratorium. I think it would make sense if we were going to have to do a host community agreement. I would hate to go through all that process and then not have to do it, because I think it would be a lengthy process. So I would be more in favor of what you alluded to have a moratorium, say, for 6 months after, if this were to pass, before the first license could be issued, to give us at least that amount of time to work on a host agreement. But I would rather see this passed before we start working on all of that, because it may be totally unnecessary.
A comment while it's fresh.
Thank you, Pat. Mark, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just one other thing. I just wondered what impact, especially outdoor, might have down in the industrial area on 129 that you're just rebranding and so forth to try to draw new businesses in. And I'm just a little bit concerned about it down there.
That makes sense.
I'm sorry, Evan, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's
You
fine.
said
I
just-
apologize.
Just a comment, Evan, before I can. I have no stake in this, but if a bylaw, zoning bylaw, or any bylaw is passed by town meeting, it has to go to the Attorney General's office, as we just saw with the one with the wildlife feeding bylaw, and the Attorney General's office has up to 180 days of which to review and issue approval of a zoning bylaw or a town bylaw. So you're going to have 6 months before anything happens, assuming that there's an application that becomes in once the bylaw is approved and posted by the town upon approval by the Attorney General. So I just offer that for your informational purposes. I never contemplated bringing you information on host community agreements at this point in time, because I didn't want to be presumptuous that this would pass. And two is I just figured that if it were to pass, there would be plenty of time afterwards for consideration of what that would do, given,
I appreciate that, Paul. It's not just that but like we've had questions about how does the fire department weigh in? How does the police department? How does the health? And we haven't heard from them directly. So that would be just my other concern, but I'll defer to the other board members. Any other questions? Okay. Ken, were you going to say something?
No,
Okay.
I think you hit all the important parts, and I think you're right. I think there's a lot of people we didn't hear from in this, and we probably should. So
does the board want to vote tonight, or do you want to defer the vote and bring in some of the other people?
And defer
the vote.
And so we were talking over each other. Ken, what did you say?
I prefer to defer the vote.
George?
Defer the vote, please.
Okay. Mark?
I would prefer to defer it as well.
And Pat?
I'm ready to vote, but it seems that everybody else wants to defer, so that's fine.
Okay. So could we work, let's identify who we want to bring in for this discussion. The fire, the chief, the police, and Board of Health. Anyone else?
Probably water districts.
Yeah, there were comments about water and sewer.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Okay.
All right, that's actually a great point, the sewer, because I'm really curious what that would do.
Okay. So we'll get it back on one of our future agendas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and Evan, you had another one, I think.
Yeah, the last one is Article 40. We may want to table this one since it's directly related to Article 39. In essence, if Article 39 fails to get 2/3 vote at town meeting, then there is no action needed on Article 40. The only reason Article 40 would be taken up again is if Article 39 passed. We would then need to, as proposed in Article 40, make some wordsmithing revisions based upon Article 39 passing. In essence, Article 40 puts the belts and suspenders prohibition back on retail sales.
If Article 40 is contingent on Article 39, does anybody have any issue with just voting on that tonight? Or do you want to do them? We can do them together. It won't take.
I mean, I think that should be a relatively quick one, but we do have to take a vote on it. You know, even if it doesn't pass it, if 39 doesn't pass at town meeting, we won't know that until town meeting.
Right. I guess what I'm asking is, do you feel the need to couple the vote with the two together, or do you want to vote on this one tonight?
Again, I'm ready to vote. I don't know how everybody else feels.
Mark, Ken, George, are you okay voting on this one tonight? Or do you want to wait?
I think they're together, but excuse me.
All right, well then we'll just do them together. It won't take long.
The same thing will happen with 41, Article 41, which is the general bylaw prohibition of marijuana uses. So
Okay.
they're all linked together, that if
Yeah.
you allow a use, then you've got to modify the other two or eliminate the.
So we'll just do them all together. Thank you, Evan, and planning board members for coming.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Take
All
care.
right.
So Virginia, being at, almost 8:30 already, we haven't gotten through many articles, but is there any thought of maybe holding off on the articles that Paul and John were going to present to us and finish out the other parts of the agenda? Because we probably still have 15, 20 minutes, right? At least of the, I mean, I don't know how everybody else feels about that, but we had mentioned the reason we scheduled so many meetings was it so that we wouldn't have to cram these all into one night.
Well, John is here, so if there, and he's been waiting, so, I mean, I don't know if he's, John, are you here primarily for the capital articles?
Yes, for the capital and also just during Paul's presentation, but whatever the board decides, I'm fine with if you want to defer.
Are you,
capital next
Pat, are
week.
you suggesting deferring or just going out of order and coming back depending what time it is?
Well, I guess if depending what time it is, but I mean, we had
Because
talked.
I'm fine to keep going. I don't know how the rest of you are. I think some of these are going to be very quick.
Well, I agree, but if they're quick, then it doesn't matter if we do them this time or next time.
I'm just sensitive to, we've had John sitting here all night.
I understand.
Mark, George, Ken,
I'm
Why
fine.
don't we just go through John's?
all right.
Good.
Where do you want to start, Paul?
If
Is it the capital plan briefing or?
yeah,
your
yeah,
charts?
we can start. Yeah, let's start with the capital plan thing. Go to Article 8 and just have John do his presentation. Then we can see where we are and then go from there.
This presentation or your maroon presentation?
John's presentation right there, that one,
That
yes.
looks good
Okay.
for capital. Thank you. So try to keep this brief. Back in January, recall, we provided at a tri-board meeting, we provided a real high-level overview of the capital plan at that time that was recommended by the Capital Planning Committee. And tonight we thought it'd be helpful with town meeting in the future, just to touch upon all the individual projects. So the next slide just shows total recommended capital plan by functional area. And you can see that probably the most significant investments are in the areas of school building, school technology, and public works. The total is just under 3.9 million. There's a project that I'll talk about later that we have a $75,000 contribution from the Child Care Revolving Fund, bringing the total to be borrowed just down over to just over 3.8 million. If we go to the next slide, first area is municipal technology. This is a continuation of a prior year effort to transition a number of town buildings over to an electronic swipe security system. So the idea is to eliminate, and it'd be similar to what we have at the town office building and other facilities in town. The focus here would be on the police station and center fire station, so that they would be added on to the same system. Going on to the next slide, this project involves a senior center at a cost of just over $316,000. This project will completely repave the front and rear parking areas. Also, the facilities division will be reviewing the parking space layout to see if any more parking spaces can be accommodated and if that's feasible or not. Going on to the next slide, the next few slides are going to deal with improvements at our public library. And this first project involves adding an emergency generator for a cost of $145,000. And I know things have been a little different during COVID, but the thought was that, as you know, we've had to experience a number of natural events with weather. We've had some long duration power outages in town, and this would allow the library to operate during a power outage as well as it will provide a warming and power up station for residents during a long duration power outage. On the next slide, there are two other projects. This is the phase 3. This is the last phase of the carpet replacement that's been going on throughout Adams Library. This is the last phase is $25,000. The carpet's about 20 years old. And this is the second phase of a computer replacement at a cost of just under $38,000. What the library does is every 3 to 4 years, they update the computers just because they receive a lot of use. And you also have issues with, a laptop after it's about 4 years old, it's pretty much approaching obsolescence as things advance. The next slide shows a project for the police department. This involves $32,000 to purchase electronic speed and message advisory signs, similar to what you see there in the photo. What these signs do, they're a little more sophisticated, and they help the police by collecting speed data, and the goal is to assist with speed enforcement and traffic safety throughout town. If we go on to our next slide, we'll go into the also within public safety, a few projects for the fire department. They have an older SUV vehicle that's scheduled to be replaced at a cost of $61,000. They also have an older plow truck, which is used to plow all of the stations during winter snow events and for other jobs. That's at a cost of $76,000. And the existing truck will then become a backup plow truck for all of the stations. And when that happens, an older 2002 truck will be taken out of service. If we go on to the next slide, this next project involves the replacement of the hydraulic lift that's used to work on a lot of the fire apparatus. The existing lift is 30 years old, and it will not pass safety inspection. That cost of that is just over $150,000. Moving on to public works, we have some traditional infrastructure type capital investments here. $350,000 is slated for sidewalk construction or repairs in town, and $400,000 is set aside for road improvements in town. And it's based off of the list that was generated by the pavement management survey that DPW uses. At the time this was presented to capital planning, the roads that were included on the list for repaving were Hall Road, El Dorado Road, and Clydesdale Road. Going on to the next slide, two more capital investments for public works. We have an older piece of sidewalk snow removal equipment that's going to be replaced at a cost of $170,000. You can see that in the lower left. Also, a medium-duty truck for the Parks Division is scheduled to be replaced for the Parks Division, and you can see that replaces an older 2008 dump truck. A DPW director has indicated that older 2008 dump truck will be repurposed to the Sewer Division, where it will have it's a less demanding role as a backup vehicle. Going on to the next slide, we move into the municipal facilities area. The picture you see, I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. It's a steel building behind Chelmsford High School. This is the maintenance shop where a lot of the maintenance equipment and shop equipment is kept. The building's 30 years old. The walls and roof are leaking, and $110,000 is going to fund renovations to this building to make it weatherproof once again. And also DPW and facilities is going to recycle any materials they can from this project to another building that's also near the Performing Arts Center that's a storage shed. And that's where facilities houses all of their off-season equipment. So for example, in summer, all of their winter type equipment is housed in there, or vice versa, depending on the season. Going on to the next slide, under municipal facilities, $165,000 is included to replace 3 older vehicles with hybrid vehicles. And those existing vehicles will be repurposed to other departments, including the library and senior center. And that will help us avoid, the senior center and library has a need for a truck or another vehicle but this will allow us to avoid buying a new vehicle. In effect, those two departments will be receiving a hand-me-down vehicle. It still can be used, and it may not be able to be used for the facilities division, but they can be used for library or senior center use. If we go on to the next slide on the municipal facilities, we have two more projects. This was identified as an OSHA safety requirement. We have a number of areas where we need to install roof safety ladders and skylight grates, which is a safety device to prevent someone that may be doing work on the roof from accidentally falling through a skylight. And you can see the number of grates that are scheduled to be purchased and installed. The cost for that project is $45,000. Just under $50,000 is budgeted to add building insulation at the Chelmsford Center for the Arts. And that's going to provide additional insulation for the underside of the roof and exterior walls of that building, which will save us energy in the long run. Going on to the next slide, we move into school facilities. The first project is a school security upgrade, which you can see is just over $597,000. That's going to replace existing door hardware at the Byam and Harrington schools, as well as the Westlands Community Ed Center. And that's part of an ongoing project to go throughout all of the school buildings. The next project is the replacement of some floor tiles at the Harrington School in the cafeteria. That's just over $29,000. Also, I know the picture's a little dark in the lower left, at Center Elementary School, there's a project is budgeted for just over $30,000 to replace all of the restroom partition walls in all the restrooms throughout Center School. Moving on to the next slide. The next project involves at the Westlands Community Ed Center remodeling the kitchen and food preparation areas. The total cost is $227,700. Because the child care program uses this building, the school committee and school administration agreed to using a formula, provide $75,000 of funding towards this project from the child care revolving fund. So that'll defray the amount that we have to borrow for that. Going on to the next slide. We have two more projects related to the schools. The next one is just under $76,000. It's a kitchen ventilation upgrade for South Row Elementary School. And the picture on the right that you see is an exterior lift or elevator unit outside the Parker Middle School. That's at the end of its life and cannot be repaired any further, and that needs to be replaced at a cost of $127,000. Finally, the last project is a just over $598,000. This is the last phase of the security and surveillance system upgrades that you've been seeing in previous years. This is going to affect Byam, Center, Harrington, and South Row Elementary Schools. And you can see, similar to past projects, all of the different components that this includes. So that includes a look at all of the different projects. Town meeting will consider these projects at the spring annual town meeting. And at this point, assuming that town meeting approves all of the projects, the next step in the process would be for us to issue bonds scheduled sometime in the early fall of this year to finance them. So that concludes a look at the capital plan. If anyone has any questions, I will be glad to answer.
Any questions from the board?
Just a quick one. The surveillance system, is that a continuation of an overall system in the other schools?
Yes, Mark, that's what the school administration did. Is Chelmsford High School was done most recently, and before that, the two middle schools, as well as central administration. So they've been kind of systematically going through all the school buildings to upgrade them, all of the systems.
Yeah, that's what I assumed. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I'll take a motion.
I will.
This is Article 8, Ken.
I'm just going to make sure I'm unmuted. I got it. So I will make a motion to recommend approval for Article 8.
I'll second the motion.
Any other discussion? Okay, we'll do roll call. George,
Aye.
Pat,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Ken,
Aye.
and I vote aye. So here's my suggestion. We've been going a little over 2 hours. Would you like to take a 5-minute bio break and then we just see how far we get before
I-
9:15, 9:30?
9:30. I would rather not. I mean, I don't know how everybody else feels.
Because I think it's only going to get worse as we go into May. The agendas are just going to get fuller, but with other business, that's my only thing. What would the board like to do? When do you want to end this meeting by? 9?
Yes.
Okay. You're running out of steam.
There we
So,
go.
so could I suggest then we take Paul's the other agenda items out of order and then come back to the town meeting warrant articles and we'll see how far we get?
That's a good idea.
Is
I-
that acceptable to everyone?
Yes.
Okay. So we're gonna go out of order then and talk about, George, say again? George froze up on us. All right, well, he'll probably have to rejoin. The next agenda item was the select board as liaison assignments. And I'll just step through quickly my rationale. So what I did initially was put Mark in the slots that Emily used to have. And Mark had indicated he had a conflict with the voting position for the Community Preservation Committee. So I gave that to Ken in exchange for swapping out a couple of Ken's assignments back to Mark, namely the Center Village and the Historic District Commission. Mark also had a conflict with multiple things on the first Monday of the month, so I kept the Board of Health, which used to be Emily's. I've been covering that. And then I added the age-friendly committee, which was given to me sometime during last year. The only other change that I made was Ken had stepped in to help George with the Commission on Disabilities, and he's been going to those meetings. So I just left Ken as the, I changed it from George to Ken since he's been covering that.
But I'll leave that up to George if he wants that. He can. Hold on.
George, you're on mute.
George.
Sorry. Whatever you want to do, Kenny, it's fine with me. I'll do it either way. Honestly, no problem.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
Is there any discussion? Everybody okay with this? I'm assuming you've all had a chance to review it. We don't need to go through line by line. Okay. That stops that one. Paul, we're on bid awards. You have to unmute, Paul.
I think you missed one.
Did you want to vote on NIMCOG or is that incorporated?
Oh,
into
I'm
the
sorry. I
liaison assignment
skipped one. I'm sorry. I
where it was-
totally skipped it. So we have to vote on the representative to the North Middlesex Council of Governments. It's typically been Pat. Do we have it?
I would appreciate being reappointed. Because of that, I'm on the Northern Middlesex Metropolitan Planning Organization, which funds the federal transportation dollars. And it's because of that that we get so many of these projects in Chelmsford. So I would definitely appreciate being appointed to that, to NEMCOG.
Okay. Is anybody else interested in that position? Okay, could I get a motion?
I will make a motion to select Pat Wojcik as our representative to the NIMCOG.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, roll call, George,
Aye.
Pat,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Ken,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Okay, now we'll go to the bid awards.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one bid award for you this evening. A few weeks back, I provided you by email a copy of the bid documents for the senior center kitchen renovations. Those were opened on April 14th. There were 3 bidders submitted. Examining the bid results and taking the first and 2 alternates, the recommendation from the DPW through facilities and my seeking your confirmation is to award the work and services for the senior center kitchen renovation to Trimark with the additions of alternates 1 and 2. The total bid amount is $129,756.23. Basically, as noted by the addition of the alternates, that this falls within the project budget, and the work is scheduled to begin on June 15th. Basically, that was synchronized with the closure of the completion of the school year. So basically, what will happen is the kitchen at the senior center will be closed, and then they'll go over and utilize the McCarthy School kitchen during the construction period to allow this work to get performed. So again, I'd seek your confirmation to the bid award for Trimark United East at the submitted bid price with alternates 1 and 2 included.
And what was that total?
It's $129,756.23.
Oh, what was the total budget?
The total project is $244,758, but this is the phase that had to be formally bid. There's been original work that's been done with quotes and in-house work, and then there's some finalization efforts. But this is the formal part of basically getting somebody in there to do the guts of the project.
Well, I was curious why you didn't opt to go with alternate 3 and 4 also, since that's only another $7,000.
I think those were sort of throw-ins, and they really just didn't want to go. I mean, you're talking refrigerator and tables, and I think talking to Kathleen and Deb Sirianni, they didn't want to cut it too close. I think that's something I think they can pick up at the end. You're talking bids of less than $5,000, $4,000, but they had these big items in terms of the kettle and the convection oven, which were approaching $20,000 range. So I think they just want to leave themselves a little bit of breathing room.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to award the senior center kitchen renovation bid to Trimark United East, including alts 1 and 2, for a total dollar amount of $129,756.23.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, I'll take a roll call vote. Pat?
Aye.
George, you're muted.
Aye. I don't know.
Mark?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Town manager reports?
Thank you. Just real briefly, real quick, just provided for you in your packets and the links available. We do have a summary in a comprehensive manner of the COVID monies that are comprehensive, available to the community. The guidelines for the bulk of the money are still scheduled to be released by the Treasury Department on May 10th. At this point, the town expects to receive $10.355 million over a 2-year period of the American Rescue Plan Act funds, which would bring the total, if you look at that spreadsheet, of about $13.5 million on the general government side. And then the school department is scheduled to receive $1.4 million in 2 phases, again, starting next month. And then their total funding, of all COVID monies is $3.77 million. So again, once we get more details on the guidelines, we'll have discussions and meetings and stakeholders in terms of how best to proceed with that, as well as how do we integrate it with other state and federal programs. For example, Lisa Maroney, our business development director, today sent out an email to her distribution list of the restaurant monies that are becoming available under COVID relief, which are totally separate than the municipal monies. And then the other item I have is to provide the board with formal notification that since your last meeting, we did receive correspondence from the Massachusetts School Building Authority regarding the town's 2020 statement of interest pertaining to the school project, and that project was denied or not included in the current funding round. The funding round for 2021 is now open. I did reach out to Dr. Lang to see if there would be a request forthcoming. He said that's being taken under advisement at this point in time. So at this point, I don't know if there'll be any further action in the current funding round going forward for a school project. So that's where we are under my report this evening. I just have one appointment for the Council on Aging for Timothy Sherry for an unexpired term, 3-year term ending on June 30th, 2023. This appointment has the endorsement of the Council on Aging. Under, Mr. Sherry has attended 2 of the recent meetings of the Council on Aging. He's, seemed to be a good fit. The council endorses him. He's interested in seeking appointment. So I'd seek your confirmation of the appointment of Tim Sherry for unexpired 3-year term ending June 30th, 2023 on the Council on Aging.
You have a motion?
So I'll make a motion to approve the appointment for Timothy Sherry for a 3-year term expiring on June 30th, 2023.
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion? Okay, we'll do roll call. George?
Aye.
Pat?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
And I vote aye.
Thank you.
And next we have meeting minutes. We have 2 sets to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the February 8th Select Board meeting minutes, 2021.
Do you have a second? Oh, Mark's abstaining, so can I get
Yeah.
a second from someone else?
I'll second.
Okay. George?
Aye.
Pat?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
And I vote aye.
And then I'll make a motion to approve the April 8th reorganization meeting minutes for the Select Board.
I can second that.
Okay. Roll call. George?
Aye.
Pat?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
And I vote aye. We'll go through liaison reports. George, do you have any tonight?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Pat?
Yeah, I have a couple. First of all, I want to congratulate the football team. I don't know if anybody else watched that game on Friday where they played in the snow. I guess you did, Ken. You were probably there. That was an amazing game. If you haven't seen it, you need to watch it, especially the last 28 seconds.
30 seconds. Right.
Especially the touchdown reception, most especially.
Boy, that was a good game. Wanted to mention about the Chelmsford Police Foundation. Usually every year they give awards to officers that have performed above and beyond the call of duty. Last year, they did not have their usual ceremony, so recently they did their awards for 2019, and there were several officers that were awarded the meritorious awards for outstanding performance of duty. For one incident where there was an attempted home invasion, the officers that were recognized were Sergeant Phil Doobie, Detectives Jeff Blodgett and Brian Ubley, officers Nick Zeminski, Chris Marty, David Leo, and Derek Hill. A second incident was a man threatening to harm himself and others, and the responding officers de-escalated the situation and brought the person to a hospital for evaluation. Those who are recognized at this point were Sergeant Steve Fredericks, Detective Sergeant Bill Carlo, Detective George Tyros, Officers Brian Richard, Craig Mead, and Chris Marty. And the third situation that they talked about was a group of officers that assisted Lowell police officers with a murder investigation. They searched a wooded area near the town line with Lowell, and the suspect was taken into custody without incident. Here they recognized Sergeant Steve Hawkins, Detective Sergeant Bill Carlo, Detective George Tyros, and Officer Matthew Fernald. I hope I got everybody on that. So congratulations to them. Good job, all of them. It's good to hear about something positive that happens with patrol officers these days. So good job. And just a couple of things with the library. Tomorrow on April 21st, the author of the one book is going to be conducting a Zoom session. That book is called How to Be a Good Creature. The author is Cy Montgomery. If you want to sign up, you can go to the library and register for that. It's 7 o'clock tomorrow night. And on May 2nd, Sunday, May 2nd, the Chelmsford Friends of the Library will be conducting a pop-up book sale where books will be sold out of the trunks of people's cars. I've done this a couple of times with them. Books are put in a paper bag and stapled shut, and you can get 7 books for $5. And that's pretty amazing because I've bought a couple of the bags of books myself, and any of the 7 books that are in that bag is worth $5, more than $5 just itself. So that'll be Sunday, May 2nd from 1 to 2 p.m. So get caught up on all the reading that you'll need for the rest of the year. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Ken?
Just a couple things. I got a note from the Chelmsford Tree Committee letting me know that the 2 purple beech trees that we planted, one at the Garrison House and one at Sunny Meadows, are both doing well and growing wonderfully. And if you're out at either site and you want to stop and see them, they have them. You'll see them because they're in a 4x4 sort of 2x4 enclosure to keep animals out. But it's pretty impressive that the trees have grown so much in just a matter of a few years. And then the other thing that maybe we could throw on with the traffic committee in the center, that when we were talking about tonight, there was a Commission on Disability meeting, but I was here. Handicap parking downtown, could we add maybe that to the traffic committee when they're looking at the spaces down there?
That'll be part of the plan that will be presented.
Okay, great. That's great to hear. All right. That's all I have. Thank you.
Mark, do you have anything tonight?
Not on the liaison
Okay.
side, no.
Okay.
But I would like to say I appreciate Pat recognizing those officers, because I've read that article and looked into that as well. And I think it's a great job and it was very worthy recognition.
Thank you. I just have one from the Senior Center. Through partnerships with the Elder Services of Merrimack Valley and the Greater Lowell Health Alliance, the Senior Center has been able to assist over 150 people to get vaccination appointments in the area. So if you are over 60 and having difficulty getting an appointment, you can call the Senior Center at 978-251-0533, and you can be put on a wait list to get assistance. And I think that's also great news that on behalf of what the Senior Center is doing. Okay. And I just to check, is everybody spent? Do you want to defer the town meeting articles to another night? We're coming up on 9 o'clock. That's why I'm asking. I know how Pat feels. You guys okay? Mark, George?
Well, you
Yep.
guys would know better than I how long these all take, so I'm gonna leave it with you guys.
Okay. I think folks are running out of steam. Ken, are you okay deferring? Or do you want to knock some of them off? I'm still doing okay.
Sort of hitting the wall, but
Okay. All right. Paul, is that okay with you if we just keep filling them in on other nights?
Sure. We've got next meeting is the 3rd, then we have the 10th, and if necessary, the 17th. So
Okay. And thank you, John, for
Do you think,
coming.
Paul, do you think we're okay doing this?
Yeah, or do you think we should try to knock some of them off?
No. As you noted, there's about a third of the articles that are consent agenda type, so we'll be able to go through them quick on another night. Yeah, we'll be able
Because
to go through it.
I'm also trying to keep in mind, we're trying to bring in updates from our councils also for different executive sessions in May.
Yeah.
So that's going to add to the length of our nights. So
So, yeah, what
that
we
in
should do
mind,
is
the more we push off, the more we're fitting into May.
yeah, we can discuss sort of a hard stop like on those meetings. So that way the councils
Okay.
know when to start and you know when to finish. Yeah, definitely. So if you want like a 3-hour window, we can, have a stop point so that allow you the sufficient time for the executive sessions.
Okay. I don't see any press. So I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
George,
Aye.
Pat,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Ken,
Aye.
and I vote aye. So it's 8:55 p.m. and we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.